As we close off not only another year, but an entire decade, the way 2019 ended off the 2010s was like a smooth train ride. A train ride that's going at a breakneck speed, in which has gone completely off the rails, conducted by a bunch of insane and corrupted politicians who think they're immortal kings that's going headfirst off a cliff, leaving us all wondering when will this madness stop before it's too late! In other words, 2019 was quite insane, and to be honest, the same can be said about animated films released that year. The outcomes of them have been all over the place, where some were major hits and some were shocking flops, and you never know how the movie itself will be, rather if it's great, mediocre, or absolute garbage. Watching a new animated feature in 2019 was like a complete gamble, where the movies have brought out both the best and the worst out of animation that are even highlights of the whole decade on both sides. And with a crazy lineup like this, it can result in the perfect formula to make an unforgettable recap. These are the animated films that either made the year a time to be alive, or made the year feel like salt to an open wound and made everything worse. Either way, we're in for a crazy list. I'm ANIMAT, and these are the top 5 best and worst animated films of 2019.
Into the end. Into the end.
Number 5. Wonder Park. Talk about a broken down ride. And I mean both the movie itself and during the production of making it. In fact, this is one of the very rare films that doesn't even have a credited director attached to it. Honestly, that's probably for the best, because I'd feel sorry for the individual that had to carry the responsibility of this mess. While it may have some decent presentation with some nice looking and creative animation and voice acting that did try to put in some effort, it completely collapsed in itself for the obvious lack of a solid direction and horrible writing that delivered a terribly predictable story, a group of annoying characters, and a large supply of gags that aren't even funny in the first place. But the biggest problem with the feature is that it's a very unpleasant experience, not because it's so bad, but rather that it's so mean-spirited and has this melancholy tone throughout for all the wrong reasons. This is supposed to be a family film about entering in this epic imaginary theme park, but the place turns out to be this ruined dystopia where everybody can only act on survival instinct or they're out to kill you. Watching this movie is like meeting a longtime hero of yours, but they turn out to be an unlikable jerk and you can't help but feel greatly disappointed. There are many ways to describe this film, but splendiferous is certainly not one of them.
Well, that didn't work.
Nope. At least we got dinner.
Into the end.
Number 4. Ugly Dolls. The key word in the title here is ugly, and what an ugly film this is. Not because it looks ugly, because honestly, the animation does look good and colorful, but the kind of ugly that's on the inside. Beneath its cute exterior of fun-filled living toys lies a soulless core that results in such a forgettably bland kids flick, especially with a boringly predictable story, characters with imperfections for the wrong reasons, and a list of pop songs that feel like are meant to be just family-friendly filler for the radio. But what makes the blandness of Ugly Dolls highlight how this movie is bad is the hypocritical message. This is a film that tries to hammer in the moral about the importance of being unique, to ignore what society thinks is beautiful and perfect, and embrace how you are different from everyone else. Well, that sounds nice. What's so hypocritical about that? Well, it's mainly the fact that this movie tries to deliver this message, yet the film itself also tries to be like every other animated film out there. It doesn't do anything to be different or give itself its own identity. It's so generic and soulless that it's obvious that it was not meant because of passion or to embolden the art of storytelling with animation, but instead just to sell merchandise. As a movie based on a popular toy line, it's nothing more but a corporately manufactured product meant to expand the franchise. If there's one thing to take from this movie, it's that it's a great example of the old saying, practice what you preach.
You're not a model. Data does not compute.
Into the unknown.
Number 3. The Addams Family. Out of all the animated films of 2019, The Addams Family is possibly the most disappointing. I mean, we're talking about one of the most iconic fictional families in pop culture with a history of beloved TV shows, movies, and one of the most recognizable theme songs. You'd think making an animated feature with the Addams would be a recipe for success, right? Like, most of the job to make it an enjoyable experience has already been done for you. Yet somehow, this movie managed to find a way to completely mess it up. Even with some actors giving out solid performances, they're not enough to rescue this movie from turning the whimsically macabre into the dreadfully dull. The problem with this reboot is that, for a family that always pushes the envelope to reject social norms, it plays way too safe, resulting in a very weak script that supplies a set of generic and unengaging stories mixed together. The jokes often fall flat, and hanging out with the family is a lot more boring than it may seem. Even the animation brings out some mixed results, where some parts look good and stay true to the original one-panel cartoons, while others look weird and disturbing, and not in the way that you like out of the Addams. Being a forgettable and boring animated film is one thing, but when it's based on a fan-favorite franchise that's all about being anything but forgettable and boring, that makes the creative failure even harder than it should be. The Addams Family may be creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky, but if only the movie was as well.
It's hideous.
It's horrible.
Into the unknown.
Number 2. Playmobil The Movie. Yes, Ugly Dolls wasn't the only toy brand that came out with their own animated feature in 2019. Playmobil also had their own big screen adventure in order to bring itself into the movie business. As they are both based on toys, many have accused them of being rip-offs of the 2014 hit film The Lego Movie, and just try to capitalize on the feature's success. While that can be debatable with Ugly Dolls, there is no denying in the case of Playmobil. The big issue with that film is that it doesn't have an identity of its own, nor does it even try to. Instead, it focuses all of its energy on trying to be like the Lego Movie. So much so that it's near impossible to watch that film without finding at least a handful of strong similarities. And yet, while it wants to be so much like the Lego Movie, it does so without even understanding why the Lego Movie was so successful in the first place, resulting in Playmobil to have no charm and no form of likability. Even with all the action, the large quantity of gags, some decent animation, and even making it a musical, none of it makes it engaging or effective when its shameful intentions are unavoidably prominent. It shares the similar problems of Ugly Dolls, where the film is nothing more but a soulless and corporately manufactured product meant to sell merch, along with being a bland kids movie itself, but has that extra hateable layer of continuously stealing the ideas of others in the hopes that it could end up being as good as them. But ultimately, it just makes things worse, and it results in Playmobil to be just a cheap knockoff of something you wish you had instead.
This was just garbage.
Into the unknown.
And the number 1 worst animated film of 2019 is... Arctic Dogs! This is a cold brew that hits so hard that it skips the buzz and immediately goes for the headache-inducing hangover. Despite the all-star cast, this is one of those rare cases that the movie came right out of nowhere with little to no advertising warning us of what was to come. And by the time that this unexpected package was delivered, not only did it blast through the competition to become the worst of the year, but also grabbed a prominent spot among the worst animated films of the decade. It is a complete mess, where it even fails hard at being a generic kids film with how blatantly broken the story is, a group of characters that are all unappealing, stealing elements from other successful films, and low-quality animation that can often seem unfinished. Seriously, there have been times when the animation can actually glitch out. It takes all the issues from the previous films on this list and give them a boost while mixing them all together to form this ultimate concoction of everything that can go wrong in an animated feature. It is so bad that one can argue that it might have been done intentionally to make the experience of watching this as painful as possible. Just when audiences thought that they were safe from animated Arctic disasters after the release of Norm in the North, here comes Arctic Dogs with a nasty surprise showing that you can go beyond the bottom of the barrel in terms of producing bad animated features. It's one of those movies that would be very hard to top the atrocious achievements done by this picture, even if they tried. And that's what makes Arctic Dogs the worst animated film of 2019.
Make you believe it.
Now, before we look at the bright side of 2019, I would like to take a moment and give a shout out to some honorable mentions. While the year was filled with a lot of prominently good films and a lot of notably bad ones, there are still a handful of animated features that are more they're not really good, they're not really bad, they just fall in the middle where they can be okay at best and mediocre at worst. They may not be some of the most notable animated films of the year, but they are notable for something. And in alphabetical order, they are Abominable, a beautiful looking film with great animation, but too bad it has a weak script holding back its true magic. The Angry Birds Movie 2. It may be your typically generic animated kids flick, but I'll give it credit that there is a bit more effort put onto this one. The Lion King remake. Yes, I'm counting this as an animated film, and while it has some revolutionary visuals to admire, it's still kind of pointless by being a shot-for-shot remake of the original. The Secret Life of Pets 2. Unlike the ones from the worst list, the solid work on the animation and voice acting actually saves this movie a bit from the weak writing. And finally, Spies in Disguise, a tiresome Emperor's New Groove ripoff packed with some cool spy action. Now, if I would expand both lists to make it a top 7 best and worst of 2019, the worst would have Spies in Disguise at number 7 and The Lion King remake at number 6. The best would have The Secret Life of Pets 2 at number 7 and The Angry Birds Movie 2 at number 6, while Abominable would be directly in the middle of it all as the honorable mention. They didn't try to reach any new heights or lows, they just tried.
Oh, wow. It is such a pleasure to meet not you, but you!
I like her.
Into the end.
Number 5. The Lego Movie 2, the second part. After going through a couple of toys that tried and failed to emulate the Lego Movie's success with their features, the Lego Movie itself returned earlier in the year to show people how it's done. Did it prevail to make another great and admirable hit in the leagues of the first? Well, no. But at least it still does stand well on its own. Sure, the story and some of the writing received a downgrade due to the difficult task of continuing the plot after revealing the great twist from the first, but it still has the spirit of what audiences love about the original. It still has a good dose of decent humor, the heart is as strong as before about what Legos mean to people, and of course, the amazing animation that brings these Legos to life in an unbelievably creative way. Now that the Lego Movie has become a fully established franchise with plenty to compare, this sequel would be placed somewhere in the middle, which does reflect well on how the movie itself is. It doesn't necessarily have that element of surprise or that high level of cleverness as the original or Lego Batman, but still manages to perform better and feel more like a legit Lego movie than Lego Ninjago. Basically, not the best Lego movie, but could have been a lot worse, and on its own, it still does provide some solid and well-crafted entertainment. Is it the best animated movie or the best Lego movie? Not really. But at least it can have the title of the best animated film based on a toy line of the year.
Hooray!
See, that wasn't so bad. Nothing got in.
Into the end.
Number 4. Missing Link. Among all the animated films of the year, Missing Link is easily the most underrated and the most unfortunate that not many people saw it. Seriously, what else could have been on at the time that people would rather want to watch on the big screen instead of Missing Link?
Avengers! Assemble.
Oh yeah. But honestly, that's their loss because this movie has a lot of great value. As a movie created by Laika, you can always expect the grand and beautifully done stop-motion animation that transports viewers into these beautiful landscapes and engaging action scenes, but it also carries a lot of heart as the movie evolves from being this epic world-traveling adventure to the bond between an investigator and his new friend who is also a Sasquatch. Some may argue that the story may not be as strong as the studio's other works, but thankfully, it does provide some strong execution and great voice acting to help audiences get into the adventure and to easily warm up to the characters with their colorful personalities. Sure, it's sad that it was a total flop, especially for stop motion, but that doesn't mean doom for the art form. Luckily, streaming services like Netflix is shaping up to be the new home of animation mediums outside of CGI, so stop motion will not only be alive and well, but thriving in there. And who knows, maybe Missing Link will have a new home there and become a newfound cult favorite. But for now, if people ever decide to see the film for themselves, they'll be in for quite a discovery.
Yes, that's correct. It suits you.
To the end.
Number 3. Frozen 2. I am aware that this movie received a massively wide variety of reactions, and if others would make a list like this, they would have it all over the place. Some would go higher, some would go lower, some would have it in the worst, some would put it in the middle with the honorable mentions, but for me, I think it has a perfect spot right here. Why, you may ask? Well, I'm the one making this list, so my list, my opinions, my rules. But back onto Frozen 2. As the follow-up to one of the biggest animated features, what this movie succeeds in making itself a strong feature is how it still holds on to the elements of the first. While the story may be a bit weaker and a little convoluted, it still has that great execution to have its audience intensely and emotionally engaged throughout the whole thing with some epic action, lighthearted and charming humor to balance out the dark and serious tone, great performances from the actors that help elevate the characters, the amazing animation that continues to dazzle viewers with its visual magic, and songs that surprisingly manage to reach the same level as the original. Elsa may have let it go in the first, but the sequel gave her 2 equally powerful musical moments, and they truly are unforgettable highlights for moments in movies of the year. Did it reach that amazing status like its predecessor? At least for me, not really, but it certainly was close, and the risk still paid off well for Frozen to return and venture into the unknown.
What would I do without you?
You'll always have me.
To the end.
Number 2. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. 2019 was a significant year that not only marked the end of the decade, but also the end of one of the most beloved animated franchises of the 2010s, How to Train Your Dragon. And with the third and final installment, it gave the film series a strong note to end on. The movie still managed to deliver what fans adore about Dragon, including a gripping and epic tale about the bond between a boy who is now a man and his dragon, a cast of charming characters, and the unforgettably stunning animation that presents a lot of high-flying action and a lot of dragons. But what makes this installment stand out from others is how the heart is the most prominent component of the feature. Yes, the previous films all had their heartfelt moment and is a key player in what makes Dragon one of DreamWorks' most beloved franchises, but with The Hidden World, this is the finale. This is the last time that Hiccup and Toothless would go on an epic adventure on this scale together, so the heart must take importance above all else. It's tearful to see these two split after all these years, but with the circumstances that this movie developed, especially with the romance that can get cheesy, it does explain well why these characters should go on different paths to have their own happy ending. After all these years, it's been an incredible journey, but now that it has come to its conclusion, all I could say is thanks for the great experiences and glad to see that it all ends well in The Hidden World.
You're right, bud. It's time.
Into the end.
And the number 1 best animated film of 2019 is Toy Story 4. Ever since this movie was first announced, people were completely furious at Pixar for continuing the franchise after what many consider to be the perfect ending to one of the best film franchises. It was hard to think how they could possibly top the moment when Andy said so long to his partner, Andy. But when the time came for the fourth installment to prove itself, the backlash quickly disappeared and achieved what many think to be impossible by showing that there is more to tell after Toy Story 3. And it is incredible. What puts this movie above the rest is the way that it not only successfully continues the story, but doing so while maintaining the legendary quality of the Toy Story franchise. It presents very rich and complex writing that gives out a thought-provoking and very emotional story that goes deeper into the concept of what is a toy, animation that further shows how the franchise displays the evolution of CGI from 1995 to now with highly detailed and enhanced visuals, and a cast of characters that feature recurring ones that receive a significant update and new additions that bring out more fun and great comedy. Considering that 2019 had plenty of animated sequels, what makes Toy Story 4 stand out among the rest is that this one is the closest to meet the same standards of its predecessor. And considering that this is the follow-up to what's possibly the greatest animated trilogy, that means it reached a bar where it was already at the highest point. It demonstrated that the doubters were wrong by strongly continuing one of animation's most important franchises, and that is why Toy Story 4 is the best animated film of 2019. And that's all I've got for the top 5 best and worst animated films of 2019. After that crazy year of widely varying films that can either be amazing or horrible, and the wave of sequels and films of already existing IPs, I think it's time to have a completely fresh start in 2020 and be ready for some new and more original animated features. So before we go, let's take a look at these films and see if we'll be starting 2020 on the right foot. Let's see here, don't know if I want this, Pixar. Looks great, but the movie might not be. Please let this be the comeback of Hanna-Barbera it deserves. As a SpongeBob fan, looks like it can be fun. I know I want this, Pixar. Fine, you can have one more movie, but make it worth it. I don't watch the show, but I am curious about this. Sounds lame, but I could be wrong. This is gonna be epic. I can feel it. And are you sure people still want this after all these years? Because I don't, to be honest. See you later, dudes!